There are currently tens of thousands of untreatable diseases with existing tools. We think we can make a dent in that.
This revolutionized all electronics.
Technology like this is part of what will accelerate the capabilities of the future.
We're developing and commercializing space-based solar power.
We expect to have biocomputers consume hundreds times less energy.
For breaking news live as it happens, follow BBC News in the BBC app. Save the stories you want to get your news your way. From live news and sport updates to global headlines. Stay up to date with the news that matters. Follow BBC News in the BBC app.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
The fight over fees. The US insists that ships won't be forced to pay a toll in the Strait of Hormuz as part of any deal with Iran as traffic continues to increase. Cashing in their chips, shares in the computer chip maker Micron surge after it reports a huge jump in profits. And a fair landing from Ryanair. Europe's biggest airline says it'll stop charging parents to sit with their young children. Hello there and welcome to Business Today. I'm Lukwasa Burak. There are growing signs of progress over the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. It comes as the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, wrapped up a visit to the Middle East by reassuring America's Gulf allies that no tolls will be imposed for ships to use the strait. Before the Iran war, 20% of the world's oil and gas travelled through the strait, making it a key artery for the global economy. Now, the latest numbers show that 62 ships travelled through it, but that was on Wednesday. We're waiting for the figures today. The Wednesday figure is actually the highest number since the conflict began. However, approximately 9,900 seafarers remain stuck in the strait, and concerns companies. Now, after the meeting with members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the US Secretary of State said that he wanted a deal with Iran to fully reopen the strait, but not at any cost.
There are certain things that for us are important to point out now that will never be acceptable. The first is the Straits of Hormuz are international waters. International waterways do not belong to any nation state. This is a foundational principle in the world today, without which the world would be in total chaos. If in fact we accepted that you can charge money to use an international waterway because it happens to be near your territorial space, well then this would spread throughout the world like a contagion.
OK, Richard Mead is the editor of the shipping industry journal Lloyd's List. Richard, lovely to have you with us. I said growing signs of progress, but looking at the counter statements that are coming out, had been agreed to use the southern route for all the parties, by all the parties involved, and that included Iran. Iran then came out and said, well, actually, no. So what is going on?
I would class this into negotiation strategy at this point. If you look at the wording from Amman and some of the statements that we've seen from Iran in the last 48 hours, I don't think we are yet at the stage that we can declare this to be a return to new normal. The PGSA, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, this is the the people that have been collecting tolls since the beginning, and they're in position of mandatory insurance from Iran, or their claims of territorial control. These are all just tolls by another name, and certainly, I think Iran went into this conflict understanding that the nuclear option was its leverage. It very quickly, and it's very reluctant to give that up. So this is certainly part of the negotiations, but as your reporting says, this would theoretically set a very, very dangerous precedent for other choke points around the world. Think about the Taiwan Strait, the Malacca Strait. The consequences of this being normalized are huge.
That no tolls will now be imposed. I wonder if you could... That no tolls will now be imposed. I wonder if you can just clarify that for us after what you've just said. Is Iran trying to force people to use the northern route so they can impose tolls?
You're in a situation at the moment where previously ships were centering in the middle prior to the conflict. So we now have a fairly significant shift south. So the majority are heading south and using that US approved route. But we've already seen today a number of ships do U-turns that have been approached by the Iranians, who are again asserting their control and saying to ships, you cannot pass if you are not meeting our requirements. This is in no way a return to normality. This is not a new equilibrium. It is in no way a return to normality. This is not a new equilibrium. It is a limbo period where over the next however long is left of the 60-day negotiating period, we're going to see a lot of this, I'm afraid. We are not quite there yet. This is going to yo-yo. There are going to be bumps in the road. We need the details before we can actually make any firm predictions on what happens next.
OK. Richard Mead, thank you very much for that update, and I'm sure we'll be discussing this over days, possibly weeks to come, but thank you very much for now. Thank you. OK, shares in the US computer chipmaker Micron have surged after it reported blockbuster profits. A short time ago, they were actually up just over 10%. They've been creeping up throughout the day. And that 10%, of course, was $1 billion profit, and that was for the 3 months to the end of May because of a surge in demand for its chips, and all of that being driven by AI, of course. Let's find out what's going on in the US. Samira Hussain is joining me from New York. OK, Samira, there's been so much excitement, hasn't there, over Micron and what's happened today. Just take us through it.
Well, Micron is earnings, as you rightly pointed out. But beyond that, it also has given forward guidance about what it expects in the next quarter. And they're estimating a revenue of anywhere between $49 to $51 billion. I mean, that's just huge. In the last quarter, so the quarter in which they just reported, they reported about $43 billion in revenue. The same quarter a year earlier, they reported roughly $9 billion in revenue. It also said that, look, we don't anticipate that our supply is going to be able to keep up with demand anytime soon, that they just cannot get these chips out fast enough.
OK, very quickly, the PCE has just been released for the US. This is the preferred index for the Fed to measure inflation. Why is it significant at 4.1%? And what will it mean for the Fed come
Fed's target 2% rate up for interest rates. And what it means for the Federal Reserve going forward is a bit mixed, because on the one hand, yes, this is inflation that is running higher than they want, but on the other, this is information from the month of May. So it is backwards looking, and it's not taking into account the changes to the price of oil, which has been a huge driver of the latest increases to interest rates. And so I think the Fed is probably going to...
Now, Europe's biggest airline, Ryanair, has changed its family seating policy to allow parents to sit next to their young children without paying a seat reservation fee. This comes after the UK regulator, the Competition and Markets Authority, said it was looking into whether the policy was unfair. Older is the travel correspondent for the Independent newspaper. Hello, Simon. Great to see you. So what are the details of what's happened to Ryanair?
Well, the essential line on this story is that Ryanair has capitulated, or rather it's kind of getting its retaliation in early. Let me tell you the principle, which I'm sure you will understand, of pricing in the thing, whether it's an object or a plane seat or whatever it is, at the price quoted, if you are prepared to jump through all the hoops. And lots of people who fly on the budget airlines will say, well, the eventual price you end up paying bears no relation to the original price. However, the airlines will quite rightly say, look, we will have flights at £29 if you are prepared to travel only with a small piece of luggage, etc., not choose an assigned seat. But for families, it's different. The airlines really have to sit families together. And Ryanair's way around doing this is to say, OK, the adult must pay, and then up to 4 children can be seated free. The competition watchdog, the CMA in the UK, has said, we don't believe this is in line with price regulations, and so therefore we're going to look into this. And Ryanair, ahead of that investigation, which is expected to take months, has come out fighting today, saying, all right, we'll do what the other airlines do. We'll do it reluctantly, and we'll do it because it's expected of us, rather than the very progressive and attractive policy that we currently have. And I think I would translate that as saying they kind of think that they might be judged to be unfair, and they'd rather, from bookings made today, not actually charge people in case they get told to refund everybody. But it means if you are checking in for a family, if you're buying tickets for a family, you can just say there's 1 adult, 3 kids, and Ryanair will tell you only when you've checked in where you will be sitting, and they warn that could be towards the back of the plane. Not that I can see that's a particular disadvantage.
OK, Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, a quick look at some other business news now. Apple is saying that it's going to be increasing the prices of its MacBooks and iPads by as much as 20%. The changes apply worldwide and are being driven by memory and storage chip costs. The company says this is a result of the electronics industry facing an unprecedented challenge due to an extraordinary surge in demand for chips to power AI data centers. Other companies have also increased prices recently to cover higher hardware costs. The European Union has given final approval to a trade deal it struck with the US last year. Now, this means that the wide-ranging reduction in tariffs that are likely to come into force next week, after being delayed in the European Union, Parliament even, the EU is scrapping many tariffs on imports from the US, whilst the US will also limit some tariffs on EU goods at 15%. It's one of the world's biggest trade relationships, with more than $1 trillion worth of goods exchanged last year. And Amazon says it'll invest an additional $13 billion in India to expand its AI and cloud computing services. This comes on top of the $35 billion it said it would spend last year. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy made the announcement as he met India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi. US tech companies have been pouring huge sums into India as the country becomes an increasingly important regional hub. And of course, all of our stories on the BBC News website. Do stay with us. More coming up right here on BBC News.
No one knows Asia like we do. DHL. Excellence. Simply delivered.
Keir Starmer has resigned as leader of the Labour Party, paving the way for a new Prime Minister. His decision to stand down means the UK will soon have its 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the BBC app. Stay informed with live updates on bbc.com/news. Follow the story with BBC News.
That booming noise that you hear from automatic, semi-automatic weapons, it was a pretty distinctive sound.
Overlooking the Parliament building, which is going to dramatically change after tonight's results.
That is the part of Lebanon that is now occupied by Israeli troops.
It's not just what you see and you hear as the rocket lifts off. You can actually feel the force of it.
There when the story breaks. BBC News.
Welcome back to BBC News. Let's go back to our major story, Venezuela, where rescuers are desperately searching through the rubble after 2 powerful earthquakes caused huge damage and destruction. At least 164 people have been killed and almost 1,000 injured in the back-to-back quakes. Well, Ana Vanessa Herrero is a journalist in Caracas. She sent us the latest.
We are at the municipality of Chacao, one of the worst areas that were affected by the 2 earthquakes that hit Venezuela on this Wednesday. At my back we can see one of the buildings that just collapsed in this area. This is a sensitive part of Caracas for earthquakes because from here is the tectonic fault across this area. During the earthquake in 1967, this area of Caracas was the most affected. Many buildings collapsed here then and now. At least 10 buildings has collapsed in Caracas City according to the authorities, but the most affected area is La Guaira Estate, which is just at the north side of Caracas. Or the flights and the airports are closed at the moment. The number of victims for sure will be increasing in the coming hours. We can see here machinery removing the concrete, rubber, trees, trying to look for survivors. Along this area is beside the building that just collapses. We can see also many buildings with damage in their infrastructure, blocking glasses. There are other buildings that just lost part of their faces. And the final number of victims and people injured for this, that are over the 1,000, will be known in the coming hours.
Well, the latest on the ground. Now our correspondent Pala Ghosh explains the science behind the devastation we've been seeing.
Just see those pictures to know that it's a big earthquake. The first shock was 7.2, the second one was 7.5. It was what's called a doublet. It's taken together, and they were just 39 seconds apart. Now the numbers seem quite close together, 7.2 and 7.5, but the second one had 3 times the energy of the first. Both were incredibly powerful, both enough to devastate the buildings that we saw.
You talked about the 2 earthquakes, so it's 2 earthquakes, not an earthquake and a big aftershock.
So it was 1 earthquake, 2 shocks, 39 seconds apart, and there were 20 aftershocks in the first few hours. So the aftershocks keep coming. They're not as damaging, but they do affect buildings, and there will be more aftershocks in the coming days and weeks to come.
We were talking there to Catherine, and she was reflecting on the last big earthquake. How prone is Venezuela to quakes?
Well, as she said, the big one was in 1967. They've had a few since, but it was that 1967 earthquake that brought in new building regulations that have been progressively tightened over the decades. So what you'll see is some buildings standing tall. Those are the newer buildings, but of course it's another matter as to whether the building regulations have been adhered to. So it's the older buildings, the shanty towns, the people living in other areas. They'll be the ones mostly devastated. Now, and as you said at the top of this item, we're getting in initial